Guys, if you can't tell by what's going on behind me, we're back at my favorite place on the planet, Copart Salvage Auction. If you've been around the channel, if you've been watching, you know that I recently finished a couple projects. So I'm out here, I suppose, hunting for a new one. On the other hand, Austin's chock full of projects. He's got 3 heavy ones going on right now. But as for me, I need to find something different.
Just because I'm knee deep in 3 builds doesn't mean that I'm not looking towards the future, see what I can find that might be on my plate a couple months from now.
As you guys know, we have no problem with stacking up projects that are gonna sit for months. It's kind of what we do. Of course, as is tradition, the first thing I wanted to hunt down as soon as we got into the auction is a Corvette, specifically a C7 Z06 that, now that I'm seeing the front of it, doesn't look like much of a project car at all. Holy crap, that's rough.
Ouch.
This looked great from the back, not so much from the front. It's a shame though, because it looks like it was clean. I know they had it covered up. It's gotta be low mileage, but I don't know that that matters any longer with this car.
The first thing that jumps out to me is the fact that the belt is off of the drive for the supercharger. That's a massive indication that this car took an impact to the actual motor itself in some way, shape, or form. It might just be a bracket, an alternator, an AC compressor, but that is cause for concern whenever you see that on an auction car.
Yeah, I came here originally trying to pick out a project, of course. This one we have to look at a little bit different. I suppose you could fix this, but we don't even have to dive far into this one to know the answer is you probably shouldn't fix it. Aluminum frame, it just broke right off. This car didn't have a chance. Maybe if it was a steel frame car, it could have worked, it could have survived, but impressive.
Upon closer inspection, it looks like the reason that this belt jumped off of its drive is because of this ABS module. I don't see anything broken on the parts that mount to the motor. Obviously the ABS module is pretty broken, but you don't really need that unless you're trying to fix it, which we've already established isn't a good idea on this car.
There's somebody in the comments right now typing away saying that you can fix this car for like $6 in his uncle's garage. Either way, this drivetrain itself, it does look nice. The headers aren't hit into, the passenger side looks fine, the engine's not even pushed back. For as bad as this car is hit, considering the entire front end is missing, I would feel relatively confident that you're gonna get a good drivetrain out of this. And not only that, one of the benefits of a car getting hit this hard is we can pretty much guarantee it didn't run after the impact. That means even though the oil cooler's ripped off, even though it's leaking all kinds of fluids, it was never ran dry. And again, therefore leads me to believe that if you bought this, even though it's jacked up, you're getting a good motor.
They have this sealed up very, very nicely so we can't get inside of it, but I can see that it has the 7-speed manual transmission, which is so much nicer to see than those automatic.
Agreed. And one thing I learned from the last time I was out looking at these vets, I'm not a C7 guy, though I do want to buy one. I was kind of hoping that this would be the one. You guys saw I was pretty confused about the option packages. I simply hadn't looked into them. I believe, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, this has the stitched dashboard, so this should be the 3LZ. I say that with not much confidence, but I think I'm right on it.
It does indeed have the base seats though, no comp seats, which is always a disappointment.
Yeah, you know what? We'll pretend that's the reason that I'm not gonna fix this car. It just doesn't have comp seats. If it had comp seats, I'd be all over it. The passenger rear side, I mean, we're gonna find some pros about this car. This corner from about right there to right there actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. I know that's not saying much, but when you're looking at something like this, you really have to start reaching.
If you watch the very beginning of Carrington's C6 ZR1 rebuild,
here we go.
You know he's not a fan of these wings on the C6. I don't know how he feels about the C7.
I like them.
I love the aero on the back end of these cars, even though I don't like the non-circle taillights. The first year that GM did this ever on a Corvette.
These grew on me. When the C7s first came out, I hated the base cars, but now that you have the wide bodies, and yes, the aero, which I do like on C7s because that's what it's supposed to be on, the whole thing comes together for me. But again, I suppose that's not what we're here to talk about. What I truly want to know is there any of you guys out there that would take on this as a fixer project, or like me, someone with generally not much common sense when it comes to purchasing cars? Would you write this thing off as a 100% parts car with pretty much no feasibility of fixing it? I already know your answer. We're pretty much unanimous on this one.
parts car.
I do want to buy a C7 Z06. I truly am looking for one. This is not the one. Now, though we got a little impatient on this car, I had to run to it the minute we got in here. The rest of the cars we're looking at today, they're moving to another section for us, so we don't have to be back here in the mud hunting down cars all the way throughout this massive lot.
A useful tool whether you're at the salvage yard, in a shop, or in your own driveway. The Carly Connected Car OBD2 scanner will allow you to assess your vehicle's health wherever you may be. Simply download the app, plug in the scanner, and power up your vehicle to see what issues there might be. Yikes. The Carly app is able to tell me that my R8 is in pretty bad shape. Very bad, actually, with 67 issues found. Now, some of these are a result of the accident, and others are a result of the modifications to the vehicle. But the Carly app is able to give me more information on all of them. Starting with the airbag. Front crash sensor, a result of the accident. The Carly app is able to also tell me that that is something that needs to be replaced or attended to immediately. Then we can go into the engine where we can see that there is a issue with a lambda sensor, which is a pressure sensor, which is something we definitely want to look into before we take this thing to its first track event, all the way down to the steering wheel where it has detected an issue with the steering wheel controls, probably a result of this wheel not being an OEM R8 steering wheel. Also a radio issue because this has an aftermarket head unit, but that is not a serious issue that we need to focus our energy on right now. We got bigger problems. The Carly app also allows you to look into potential mileage discrepancies and even view the driving habits of the previous owner, both of which we know to be issues on these higher end vehicles. The app is supported on both the Apple and Android platform, and the scanner can be used with almost every major make and model. So if you're looking to stay up to date on your vehicle's health, then click the link down in the description below, pick up a Carly Connected Car OBD2 scanner to add to your tool arsenal today.
I gotta point out that I do generally like walking through these lots and being surprised by all the cool cars we find, but this is pretty awesome too. What a rack of cars. GTRs, there's another Nissan up there that I'm really excited to show you guys. We have a Hellcat, a Mach 1, multiple BMWs. Where are we starting first? Or I suppose the better question is which country we're starting in first.
The most intriguing car here is probably the one on a log.
Is it because you actually like the BMW M3 competition or because it's sitting on a log? Because I know neither of us are truly BMW fans, but if I had to pick one, if I had to buy a project, that's not a bad option. First things first, the color combo is awesome. Before we even figure out anything that's going on with this car, this dark gray paint with like gold flake, black wheels, it's awesome. I know everybody hates on these new grills, but personally, I'm a big fan. Do you have strong feelings like the internet does?
I do, and especially sitting side by side, this is just, I feel like I could get sucked into this, and I'm a grown man.
I suppose the argument there is these cars make so much power that they need all that, they don't make a lot of power. I don't even know why I was going down that route. It's a BMW, it makes like 450. It's not a Porsche. The wreck on this though, honestly, first glance, I'm kind of surprised this thing got totaled. It does not look bad. Sure, whatever's going on here is probably into the upper frame rail. It's missing the front driver suspension. But do you know what these cars cost new? I believe they're over $100,000. They gotta be.
The first thing that catches my attention is carbon ceramics, which you don't see on cars that are usually under 100,000.
I actually walked past that. I did not see that.
That makes the missing suspension corner up at the front all the more painful because it had one of those on it.
As for the rear, as for the passenger side even, it looks like it just rolled off a dealership lot. The interior, carbon, blown airbag. Now, one thing that I noticed pretty immediately, and it kind of sucks, these cars are supposed to come with better seats than this, right?
Just like that Vet, this car is lacking the comp seats. I'm not super familiar as far as the trim levels on which ones would come with the comp seats, but it's always a disappointment to not see it, whether it's in a Beamer or a Corvette.
For those of you who don't know, these cars do have an option to get a really awesome seat. This section right there is hollow, they're cut out. They're one of the best production car seats I've ever seen, so it's kind of a disappointment that this one didn't come with it. Hopefully though, that'll be reflected in the sale price ultimately. Don't tell me that hood's wedged shut.
It's not moving right now.
That was exaggerated, but I suppose it's not working, unfortunately. I guess one of these latches is probably right about there, and you can see it, I think. So yeah, when this hood got hit, when the fender got bashed in, when that whole structure got pushed, I guess we're not going to be able to pop the hood. But it's a BMW after all. It's probably a stock car. We can just pop the hood on this one over here. It'll probably look the same. Yeah, just pretend this is under the hood of that. I'm pretty positive they're the same exact thing. Let's play the theoretical fixing game because somebody's definitely repairing this one. This one's by no means a parts car. Entire driver front suspension. It doesn't look like it really ripped any of the mounting points off. The control arm's broken, the sway bar's broken, the steering rack's ripped out. So the good news is there's nothing broken off the frame that I can tell from this very quick look. The wheel did get pushed back into that section there. I suppose, wow. Okay, that makes a little more sense. That's pretty rough. The good part about this car though, even though that's kind of rough, that's not an easy fix by any means, the damage is isolated up here. So you don't have to go fix this one area, put in a ton of work, and then go fix a smashed rear end as well. Now I'll speak for myself as a non-BMW enthusiast. I do love these cars, but if I was gonna fix one, especially my first one, I wanna tackle one that's a little bit easier, maybe like this M2 we'll see a little bit later. I feel like at this point we spent a little too much time in Europe, so it's only fair to bring it back home to America. Dalton, which one are we doing? The Hellcat or the Mach 1?
The Mach 1 is the car that piqued my interest the most, and out of all the cars here, I think this might be the easiest fix.
Is it because of the badges and the stickers? That's what you like about it? Or is it the base seats in a special edition Mustang? They dropped the ball in this one. I'm sorry, but every Mach 1 should have had Recaros. Ford, do better.
I'm not incredibly well versed on the Mach 1 package, but to me it looks a lot like a PP2 Mustang package. You have the wheels, the lip spoiler, the front lip looks to be about the same. So really, what is kind of the standout on the Mach 1?
A hood stripe. That's literally it, I believe. At least the Bullet, that car has green stitching. That's kind of cool. I'm not trying to be a Ford hater here though, because, well, no, I am a Ford hater, but they should have done a little more with this, in my opinion. The one good thing that they did do, assuming it's the same as the Bullet, GT350 intake manifold, throttle body and intake, it makes like 20 more horsepower, which at least it's something.
The entire front end on this car does look to be in fantastic shape, but moving towards the rear is where things get a little bit ugly.
How did they do this to both quarter panels? It literally got wedged between something. They smacked it off a tree there, they came around and did it again on this side. This is impressive. Typical Mustang activities, I suppose.
It is a curious question indeed. Which side on this car got hit first? Both have significant damage, but at the same time, both are really not that bad. Look at your gaps up here on the trunk. They're not thrown out too much. The rear window isn't even broken.
Hold on. Not thrown out too much. I don't know if you looked at this side, but I can fit my finger in there. And I don't know that I consider this not too bad. This is pretty good. I mean, that's half a quad, not squat 135 pounds. That's a lot of room there. That got hit hard.
Maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think that this car is fixable. Even though it has 2 quarters that are damaged, it doesn't look that bad to me. I have to imagine there's a little bit of suspension damage in there, but again, because this car really doesn't have anything too special on it, I think the parts will be cheap to go ahead and correct that.
And of course, if you're buying suspension used from a salvage yard, say like Lacey Parts, which I highly recommend, it's not expensive at all. Mustang stuff's a dime a dozen. This car is definitely fixable. Not an if you could, it's an if you should. And I'll reserve my judgment until we hear it run. These corner lights are on. It definitely has some power. There's nothing damaged up here, so. It does have the digital cluster, which is awesome. Good on Ford for doing that. But whoever put this thing on here, I know it's aftermarket, but come on, guys. That might be one of the cheesiest things I've ever seen in my entire life. Once again, though, reserving judgment until we hear this. Especially by salvage auction standards, this thing runs good. This genuinely sounds like a nice quiet motor, and I know these Gen 3s are notorious for what's called, I believe, the typewriter tick. The direct injection is just really noisy. You hear it a little bit in this one, but overall it's not too bad. And now that the cold start procedure stopped, there is pretty much no tick. I suppose fair is fair. It runs and it runs good, so it's not that bad. I'm in support of fixing this Ford. We won't part it out.
You should know by now that the Copart Rebuild Challenge is still open for submissions. Carrington and I came here planning on picking a car that we thought was a good candidate. My pick, it's in early. It's this Mach 1 Mustang. I think that this is a great rebuild project. The only question is, are we gonna rebuild it? Or are you?
I did voice my support for the Mustang. I do think it's a good fixer. It's not the easiest, so it's a little bit of a challenge. It's a little fun, but it's not bad enough where you're gonna have a year-long project like some cars that I've bought. The Demon, obviously. Now, don't forget, if you want to pick up that Mustang or any of the other cars here, when you register on Copart.com, use code ScrapLife20 to get 20% off your membership. As for which car I'm gonna pick, I think I'm gonna keep with tradition and go with something that's just a horrendously hard fix. Maybe it's that fire car, maybe it's this fire car, but I think I just can't get away from those things. You already know I'm a fan of fire cars, and the fact that I'm starting with this fire car over the GTR over there should tell you that it's something pretty special, or I'm really dumb, but I think it's the special thing this time and this time only. You might not be able to see much, but these cars generally come with, I believe, a 2.4 liter carbureted piece of trash inline six. Not what I'm interested in. What I am into, though, is an LS swap. Now, it's a real shame that this car caught on fire, because at some time or another, this was a beautiful car. You have the Watanabe style wheels, which I'm a big fan of. Somewhere under there, you have coilovers. I believe they're K-Sport. Either way, somebody built themselves a beautiful car here. It's a real shame to see it end up like this. While I don't know that something that's this old that caught on fire is truly going to be structurally sound ever, I can't say that it looks bad enough where you would automatically rule out rebuilding this. And I'm going to go ahead and assume you would disagree with that.
Well, these cars have a lot of issues just from their age. There's a lot of these cars that have rust issues. I think people are kind of used to fixing these things in some fashion anyway, so maybe you can get the parts to fix it.
Now, the good news about this one is if we bought this car and it wasn't fixable, if we weren't able to return this thing to the road like I'm definitely, probably, hopefully going to do with the Demon, at least we'd have a good drivetrain. If this car had the stock engine, it's pretty much a complete write-off. But the fact that we have an LS swap with a automatic transmission, which is kind of weird, I suppose we should have been able to tell by that dipstick there, we can at least pull some money out of it if we were to buy this thing and it's not usable. As for what LS it is, 853 cylinder heads. I believe those are old, either F-body or Corvette, so it's probably a 5.7 liter. The cable throttle body and the EGR block-off backs that up. So the car wasn't making a ton of power. I assume it was some kind of a budget swap, but it still had to have been an awesome car.
I have to imagine that these can get down well into the low 2,000 pounds. So even if this thing only made stock horsepower, call it 300 at the wheels, it had to have moved pretty good.
As you might imagine, this is the first time I've ever seen an LS swap 240Z, or is it a 280Z? Truthfully, I don't know the difference. It's one of the old Z cars. I've never seen one of these at auction before, so I was pleasantly surprised to be able to find a good engine in one of these cars. What do we have going on back here?
I'm adding up all the different materials in the construction of this car. We have some nice, pot metal for the trim. We have some wood that I would assume is
wood grain interior.
Maybe, or I was thinking maybe part of the floor. We have some nice cardboard that I'm gonna guess is maybe door panels. And then
what is that?
Some sort of bolted on carbon fiber, fiberglass
spoiler.
Some sort.
Did we have a spoiler on this beautiful car? They built this thing. There has to have been a spoiler, right? Actually, turn that thing sideways. Okay, maybe it was a duckbill, in which case I take back everything I just said. It looked like it may have been spoiler uprights, and in that case, absolutely not. But a duckbill on a classic car like this, all right, it passes the test. Also, I do suppose it's irrelevant at this point, but we do have ourselves what looks like a good exhaust on it. Now, as for the fire car that I'm gonna pick here as my Copart Rebuild Challenge favorite, I'm gonna have to hold judgment until we look at that GTR a little bit later. I was about to ask where we're going next, but it's clear you wanna go back to Europe. Do you have a thing for these cars, or is it just me that they're growing on?
I don't, no, but I do think that this one is a pretty easy fix. It doesn't have carbon ceramics. It doesn't have a carbon roof. I do see a couple mods here, but the ease of repairing this car, you just can't look past it.
He is not lying. I haven't been around the back of this yet, but look at that. I truly don't know at this point why it was totaled. Maybe it'll become obvious like it did on that car, but for now it looks amazing. And once again, like I did on the M3 comp, I gotta shout out this color combo. I happen to know, due to our good friend Chris Rudnick having the same color, that this is called Hockenheim Silver. Gold wheels on this looks amazing.
I can't deny the styling on both of these competition cars. Really, the only question that I'm having is why the M2 didn't get a carbon roof also. Maybe because it's kind of the budget M car, but seeing it on that, it's just lacking not having one on this.
Which is probably why they wrapped it black. They bought the M2, saved a few bucks, and instead of sticking a carbon fiber roof on it, like this beautiful one over here, they just wrapped it. And it's not the worst thing in the world. It does look okay, I suppose. And as far as carbon goes, there's plenty on the back of it. You have a diffuser, you have a wing, so it's not like they completely cheaped out on the carbon fiber. On the topic of the back of this car, it's in phenomenal shape. Just like the M3, all these European cars, the rear ends are fine. There's no damage whatsoever. The driver's side as well. Both sides of this car, just fantastic shape. As far as the interior, no blown airbags, blue stitching, which is beautiful. One of my favorite touches on these cars, the stitching they did on the seat belts. And I just heard it beeping at me, so I suppose that means we can probably start it as well. Of course, the one thing that is scary on a wreck like this is, did it blow off an oil cooler? And not being a BMW guy, I don't know which one of these is the oil cooler. What's it looking like?
It doesn't look bad underneath, but it doesn't look good either, and I think that might be why this car is here. I just don't like what's going on under there. There's not a hole in the oil pan or anything like that, but there's a couple coolers that are damaged. It's just really hard to tell if this thing actually has oil in it.
So this is one of the hardest cars for us to buy at auction. People see something like this and just automatically assume that it's in tip-top shape. There's no possible chance that the engine could have been starved of oil. And we know all too well that that's not always the case.
Looks can definitely be deceiving. From the top end, it looks a-okay. From the bottom end, not so much.
Needless to say, because of that, we're not going to start this car. Hopefully we can find something here in a little bit to fire up though. And not that kind of fire up, I mean start a car. So as much as I like this car and as easy of a fix as it will be aesthetically, the questions about the engine means there's a little more than meets the eye, and unfortunately, someone's probably going to pay a ton of money for that. They're going to ignore that that risk even exists, and that's going to price us out of buying it. Now, one car we don't have to worry about people underestimating the damage on, this GTR, which truthfully is the reason we came here today. We kind of been wanting to buy one of these to do a salvage story on, to part out, but with the craziness that is the Copart Rebuild Challenge, I have been looking for something that's just a little wild to rebuild. And I do suppose a highly modified and highly burned R35 GTR would fit the bill. I actually have owned one of these cars before. It was way back in the day. Mine was a 2009, the original one. I believe this is a 2017 and up, judging on the bumper, though I'm not gonna bet my house on that.
I believe that the headlights are kind of a telltale indication, and it does also have what's left of the steering wheel, which kind of indicates that as well.
For obvious reasons, I haven't really looked inside this car, but that definitely is the newer steering wheel. He's right. I think the dashboards are a little bit different on these newer ones as well. This, like that 240Z over there, absolute shame. They're actually burned in a very similar way. This one also apparently has some carbon fiber in the trunk. I suppose we'll dig into that a little bit later. And not only does it have carbon fiber in the trunk, there is a exhaust that is 100% titanium based on weight. I'll let you be the judge as well. That thing is way lighter than I expected it to be. That's titanium, it's gotta be. If that was stainless, you wouldn't have got 3 of those in.
As I'm getting my swole on here, I can also see that this is a Boost Logic exhaust, and I'm not nearly as strong as I used to be, so yes, this is definitely titanium.
Yeah, I gotta admit, that kind of sucks. Boost Logic, top notch. They make awesome parts for these cars and quite a few other cars. That really hurts to see a titanium exhaust, though. I do suppose it doesn't look physically damaged, does it?
No, I was just thinking the same thing, that it's ugly because of everything that burned down on top of it.
Patina.
Patina, okay. That makes sense, but I don't know if people like patina on GTRs. I mean, it's not a 270Z.
While we can consider that patina, and you could probably put that back on a car, I don't know what you're doing with this, what used to be a carbon fiber spoiler, though that is kind of impressive. The entire trunk is full of that. I don't suppose that all that's a spoiler. Maybe there's a rear diffuser on this too.
You can see some formed molded carbon fiber, so this is either maybe part of a trunk or this had a full carbon fiber spoiler on it.
As much fun as I'm having digging through the graveyard that is this trunk now, I think the front's gonna provide us with a little more value. One thing of note though, these are some small wheels on here, 18 inches I believe. This car had to have been making some power. For you to have drag radials on the front end of one of these cars, you're definitely making some power. And I suppose that's all backed up by the fact that I see these massive fuel lines here. Oh, what's that? 4 Innovations fuel pressure regulator, Visconti tuning fuel rails. So the more we look at this, the deeper it gets. Titanium intake pipes. The one kind of weird thing about this, usually when you're running a fuel system like that, when you're running tires like that, you'd have some big turbos on here. The fact that we have stock intercooler pipes, you have stock turbo manifolds down there, which, don't get me wrong, you can put bigger turbos in the stock housings. It's what I did on my car, and it made about 1,000 horsepower. I would have expected some big aftermarket turbo manifolds and maybe a more flashy turbo setup.
From what I can tell in the grill, it looks like factory intercoolers up front, which again is not what you have on big power cars.
That's weird. He's definitely right about that. Factory intercoolers. And this doesn't look like a car that somebody took back to stock after it burned down. They would have definitely taken these titanium pipes. They would have ripped the fuel system out of it. Maybe what's going on here is that they were prepping for a build and it just never came to.
I feel like a lot of the GTR guys do build these cars in stages. So I think that theory does hold up, that this thing was progressing along and was eventually hoping to make 4-digit horsepower.
I'm not sure that we can call that a letdown, though I was hoping for a little bit more under the hood considering what's going on outside of it. But if we were to buy this thing, even if we were to part it out and not fix it, I have all the reason in the world to believe this engine's good. So there's nothing up here that's touched whatsoever. The engine's completely intact. I suppose Tetsushi Matsumoto's creation lives on. But on the parts front, this entire front bumper, they're big money. The old GTR stuff's worth a ton of money, so I can only assume that this is worth more. We have a bunch of good under the hood, and then of course we have Ray's engineering wheels. They're not cheap by any means. You have these big 6-piston Brembo brakes. There is a lot of money in this car, but that's not why I like it. Frankly, this car just reminds me of a less bad version of my Demon. The interior, though it is burned, is somewhat intact, way more intact than mine was. Also, unlike my car, this one comes with a key. Though I do suppose that's a very minor detail. Now, when you get to the rear here, it does look like there was some type of an impact, which I have to presume caused this fire. I don't think that rear trunk pin, there's no way that buckled from just heat. This thing got smacked into right there. Maybe the exhaust got pushed into a fuel line, the fuel tank. I don't exactly recall where they are in this car. Or maybe it just got pushed into a broken diffuser and lit up. It is a shame, but structurally, this thing looks much more intact than my Demon. The roof isn't coming off. It's fairly flat. I wouldn't say it's the most structurally sound thing in the world, but at least it's attached.
The only real mystery on this car that I'm having trouble figuring out is where this damage came from. All the stuff at the back, the fire, it's all pretty easily explainable, but giant gashes and dents in the hood, that's a little bit curious.
We know on the Demon, the fire department got into it and screwed up the door. I would suppose, though, that if they did that here, there would be much more damage to this light aluminum fender. That is really weird, because from this way, they're just straight holes. And I know often when we buy cars like this, you guys down in the comments tell us what happened based on your experience, maybe with the fire department or a wrecker service. And I'm going to stop right there, because what do we have here? An 85 sensor. That's an odd place for it. Usually I see these inside of the car. I suppose that's some of the wiring maybe for the fuel system. What is that? I want to say that's one of those fancy fuel filters.
While Carrington's checking out the mods, I'm just seeing that the battery cables aren't cut, which is the reason that I got in here, which makes me really curious about that damage and honestly what caused it.
Coming back to the rear because I just can't get away from looking at terrible damage. I think this suspension here got whacked pretty good too. I can't tell for sure. I suppose some of it could have melted in the fire. That wheel is obviously like 15 degrees negative camber. The one on this side, same deal. So maybe it did melt. If they're both equal, I don't suppose they would have both got whacked in different directions. Actually, now the more that I look at it, the inside of that wheel is completely melted. It's gone. It's burnt in half. That does not look like wreck damage to me. This thing is wild. It is by no means an easy fix. Personally, I already have one of these projects, so I wouldn't pick this one up. If we buy it, it's for parts. But I do think that I'm gonna make this my pick for the Copart Rebuild Challenge car that one of you guys should definitely buy. I think you just have to pick something terrible like this, show what you can do, or at least attempt like I'm trying to do with the Demon, even if it makes no financial sense and you're roasted endlessly online. You guys know I usually try to preach some common sense, at least for you on the channel, but this one time I'm gonna encourage you guys to just do something dumb and join me in buying a car that makes absolutely no sense. Now let's see if we can redeem ourselves from a car that makes no sense whatsoever to a car that looks like it makes all the sense in the world. A beautiful Hellcat, my personal favorite color. I typically am not a Charger fan, but a wide body gray one, I gotta admit, it's awesome.
While this one makes a whole lot more sense than a Barbecue GTR, there has to be a reason that it's here, because from the front end, it looks like a car that you would just see at the movie theater.
How's the engine bay worse than that GTR? It's quite literally a completely intact car. That thing's destroyed in the engine bay. It's disgusting.
Well, the first thing I'm going to check is the oil, and it is perfect level, so I don't think there's really anything wrong underneath. Flat tire, broken window. I'm going to assume that this car is here for theft reasons, but I wonder what's missing. I don't like your face.
Another Mopar at salvage auction due to theft. Imagine that. If it wasn't so tragic that you can't own one of these cars without assuming that it's going to get stolen, all right, now I don't like your face. What's going on?
They left the motor, they left the exterior panels, they got to the interior, and really the question is how bad?
Oh, okay. So this entire radio panel's gone. The radio itself is gone. Oh, hold on. What's that? That radio panel's in the back seat. So maybe they found everything that got stolen. Is the radio back there? What wheel is that?
I don't know.
That looks like a CTSV. Wait, hold on. Look at that thing. Wait a minute. That wheel's burned to a crisp. This has to be a takeover car, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Oh yeah, takeover special. Look at these tires. Somebody stole this thing. They were joyriding it, and they even brought a spare set of wheels, which is prep that I usually don't assume that's gonna happen at the takeover. That's drift car stuff. How nice of them. We stick power to it. They even left the flashers on. Really showing off in the middle of that intersection. Question is though, will it start? I am pressing the brake. Let's go. Come on. The start button is plugged in back there. I don't know, maybe the fact that they cut the harness instead of just stealing the thing, maybe that's gonna make it not start. This is a beautiful car on the outside, but it definitely has its share of electrical issues. Not only that, if this thing truly was stolen, hooned, takeover, whatever you wanna call it, I don't know what the term for participating in the takeover is, this thing may have a little more issues than you would anticipate. Somebody did this car dirty.
I said earlier that the Mustang I thought was the easiest fixed here, and at face value, this one looked like it was a whole lot easier. The more you dig though, it's terrifying. I want to know how far the electrical issues go on this. The fact that it's not starting, you can't get the trunk to pop, that doesn't sit well in my mind that this thing doesn't have layers upon layers of problems that you'll have to dig through.
I'm gonna be the optimist here. I think it's just that cut harness. Maybe it makes the car just act a little weird. I don't think this car is too jacked up electrically. The one thing I am noticing though about the front end, which makes no sense given that this is definitely a takeover car, or at least I'm gonna say that, it doesn't have rainbow headlights. It's missing that key ingredient for just being a takeover star. At least the body's in phenomenal shape. You're gonna probably end up with a decent car. The only issue we have here though is somebody's gonna pay a ton of money for this. A Widebody Charger Hellcat like this, I haven't seen one in this condition go for under like 50 grand in a very long time. And considering the fact that you would need to come out to the lot like we did today to notice all the random issues with this car, somebody's gonna buy this and may end up being a little disappointed.
The BMWs let us down as far as being able to be started. This Hellcat did also, but what's not gonna let us down? Old faithful LS3.
Come on. Come on, it's a vet, it'll do it. It's gonna go. Well, if we can't get it started, there is a little bit of good news here. It's an LS, so it definitely runs perfectly fine. We've been beating on this jump box all day trying to get stuff to start. I suppose we may have just ran out of juice at the end.
It says it runs on Copart's website, so if I'm gonna guess, this thing probably sounds a lot like this.
Personally, to me, I think this thing looks way too stock to be cammed like that, but I suppose you never know. This isn't usually how I like to operate, but I do feel that we know these C6 Corvettes enough to assume there's nothing wrong with the engine because they're generally just so healthy. I don't know if the headlight caught on fire or it came from the outside. That's my guess at the moment. I think somebody came up and maybe messed with this a little bit in the worst way possible.
This car does have the beautiful transparent target top, and with very, very minor damage, I think this is another very easy fix.
You know, I might have to just pick this thing up anyway, just to satisfy my curiosity and to prove to these guys here that we know what we're talking about, and it definitely is a fine running LS3.
The biggest thing about this car, it is not an automatic, it is a manual transmission. It just keeps getting better and better.
Go down and put it in the comments if you want to see black C6 rebuild number 3, which I'm positive none of you do. What was that you just yelled across the lot?
The odometer just popped up. This thing has 15,000 miles.
15,000. Okay, not maybe, I'm definitely gonna keep an eye on this thing, and I hope it ends up back at our shop. In the past, I've paid between $8,000 and I think $11,000 for cars similar to this, one with that low a mileage. Maybe I can go 12 grand on this, 13 even? This one, the options are kind of lacking, but I still think it's a great car, especially because of the odometer, especially because it's an LS3, and of course because it's manual. Now I'm gonna let you take it from here because I truthfully don't know why this next car is in this lineup. It's the Oddball, the odd one out. I don't even like these cars. These are just burble tune monsters.
There's a good reason it's in this lineup. I can't afford a GTR. That's why I drive a Nissan Juke, but said Juke is probably pretty blown up. So I have to maybe consider a baby GTR driveline swap. I know everybody wants to see it. They blow up the comment section to put one of them in the car. This might be as close as I can get.
I gotta say, I approve. I've always looked at these cars as kind of just a joke. I hate to say that, but I view them as just cheesy flamethrower mods, burble tunes, and unfortunately I am also kind of sad to see that same virus has infected the C6 ZR1 community. That is, of course, if you live in Pennsylvania. But let's talk more about Nissan Jukes. So I guess the question I have, and I'm not the Nissan Juke expert here, clearly, but would this even fit?
It's been done with a GTR driveline. As far as my understanding, these are essentially the same platform. I can't see why it wouldn't fit.
I do know for a fact there's somebody in the comments right now just laying into you about calling the VR30 the same as the legendary VR38 DETT. I think I nailed that.
You guys are gonna have to jump down in the comments and let me know, should I do a swap like this in the Juke? Will it give it some sort of credibility, or are you guys still gonna make fun of me?
Well, on the topic of this Q50, it sounds like you have a little bit of thinking to do, and I do as well. Somehow we came here in a lot full of just awesome cars and are both most interested in 2 Nissans, and I do realize that is weird. I suppose now's about the time you guys go down in the comments and tell us which one of these cars you want to see us buy, which one you would buy, and for what reason. You fixing it, you parting it out? Let us know, we'll see you back here soon.
Nissan Jukes for the win.